Evening, we're going to be talking about the hashpah of the stars, the influence of the stars on our lives, and a little bit of astrology, and if that's a real thing or not a real thing, and how the stars impact our everyday lives. So let's get started. If you don't have the name and edition, we are in section 2, chapter 7. Hine. Kvar beyanu bechelik rishon. We already explained in the first section. Shekol inyani hagashmiyim sharshemhu bakochos hanivdalim. Everything in the physical world has its source in the kochos. You go back to the first section, we talked specifically what the kochos are. V'amnam. Sham mishtarshim hanyanim ha'ele b'chol hadrachim shetzrichim lishtarish v'achar kach tzrichim liyatek u'limashech halagashmiyah. So everything is sourced in the spiritual world, in these kochos, and they come down to us, and they need to be transferred into the physical world. Right, so every physical thing that exists has its source in the spiritual world. These are ideas that the Derech Hashem, the Ramchal here has talked about many times, an idea that the Nefesh Chaim speaks about, and many other Svarim talk about. Now for this purpose, now we're talking about, now we have these sources in the spiritual world, and they need to be transferred into the physical world. So for this purpose, the stars and the, as he translates them, the orbital spheres. Rabbi Naaman, by the way, translates for ArtScroll, so he is an excellent translator. So the stars and the orbital spheres, shebehem ubesi buvehem, through them and the way they rotate, nimshachim menatakim akol osam hanyanim. All of these things are transferred into the physical world, shenishtarshu v'zman lamala beruchanim, that are sourced in the spiritual world, elagashmis polamata, into our physical world. So the stars and the constellations and the orbital spheres, as he says, they serve as the objects which transfer this sources of the spiritual sources for everything into the physical world. Now, he brings insights on the bottom from the Ramchal and Adi Ramarim that even though these spheres are physical objects, they're not spiritual objects, but he says, the way he says, is the sublime roots of creation are cloaked within them. So the stars and the constellations, they serve as the vehicle, or their spiritual roots, serve as the vehicle that transfer the spiritual to the physical. So the spiritual sources are transferred through the stars and the constellations and the orbital spheres. And he points out also that when you find statements in Chazal about the planets and the stars that seem to contradict science, he says very often those Gemaras are talking about these spiritual components of the stars and the constellations that are not meant to be taken literally, but rather are statements that are discussing the spiritual dimensions of these objects. V'amnam minino kochavim madrigasayim, the number of stars and their levels, v'chol machlokesayim, and their different divisions. Hayu kfima shirasa chachmel yayin. It's what Hashem wanted. Hayu tzarich v'nazal ha'etek hazeh shezacharnu, to do this transfer that he said. V'hinei nishpa mino kochavim koach hakiyum el ha'atzamim hagashmiyim shetachteim she'al yideim netak inyanam bebechinaso lamala b'shrashim el bechinaso lamata. And it's through the stars that everything in the physical world has its kiyum, is given its energy to survive through the spiritual, from the source in the spiritual world. Through the stars, it transfers into the physical world. Is a question? Someone say something? Nope. If you have questions at any time, you can always interrupt me. This is it's also meant to be a discussion. But he writes in the bottom here, Rabbi Naaman, that he's quoting Ramchal and Das Tfunos, that obviously the stars have no independent power. They're just serving as the vehicles. Whatever Hashem made them do, that's what they do. And that's what the original idolaters at the beginning of time made a mistake. They assumed that the stars were the source of the power, and Hashem, not Hashem, just using them as a vehicle for that power. So that's one thing we see that the stars and the constellations do, is that they serve as the vehicle that transmits the spiritual energy into the physical world. Ve'ulam, Hashem set another thing into the stars. Anything that Hashem wants to happen in the physical world, they are going to pass through the stars and the constellations. Derech Mashal, for example, Hachayim, Ha'oisher, Hachachma, Hazara, Kiyotze. A person's life, his wealth, wisdom, children, all of that, Kol Eile Hanyanim Muchanim L'Mala B'Shrashim, they're all prepared what should be decreed for a specific person in the spiritual worlds, in the Shrashim. And they come down into this world in the way they're supposed to through the stars. Whatever specific way Hashem wanted to set that up, the Sivayim Yiduim, and based on their rotations. And everything that's going to happen in the physical world is divided through the stars. And everything that happens in the physical world is under the power of the way that the stars are organized. That whatever new thing should happen or whatever changes should happen in the physical world, that happens through the stars. Based on the will that is attached to each person. And he writes here that a specific star or specific constellation provides shefa to a specific object in the world. Now, okay, so let's continue. It's going to become more clear. Every human being is also under this power. So whatever is decreed in the stars will happen to a human being, and we are all under that power. So it sounds like certain things are decreed on us, and we have no power to change it. For example, like he said, a person's life could mean years of his life, how long he's going to live, how much money he's going to have, his wealth, how many kids he's going to have, and things like that. It sounds like it's decreed from on high. They give the example, and this is what we say, mazel. A person's mazel tov, right? There's such a thing called mazel, and that's what it's based on. And he says here like that a person could be born under the influence of Mars, and it could be a bloodthirsty person. That could be a midah that he's born with. Now he could use that either to become a murderer, or he could use it to become a moel or a shochet or something like that. It's up to him how he uses that. So now if we would stop here, it would seem that, whatever a person gets, he gets, and he has nothing to do, there's nothing he could do to change it. But that is not the case. Continues the Ramchal, Omnom. It is possible to negate what will have the power of the stars with a stronger force that's higher than that. And on this concept we said, Ein Mazel Yisrael, there is no mazel to the Jewish people. Because the gezerah of Hashem, what Hashem decrees, and his hashpah is higher than the power which he implanted within the stars. And what will happen will be based on his hashpah and not on the hashpah of the stars. So the way the Ramchal learns is that what certain things that will happen to a person are decreed based on what the stars are. However, it sounds like he has the power to change it. A Jewish person has the power to change that through a large, through a large schus. Now, many people are familiar, this is a famous debate in the Gemara of Ein Mazel Yisrael or Yesh Mazel Yisrael. Is there mazel for the Jewish people? Meaning, are the Jewish people controlled by the stars at all, or are we beyond that? So I think with the Ramchal here, he says like Tosfos. There's a lot of opinions how we paskin, but someone just asked, can tefillah change mazel? So it seems like, according to the Ramchal, yes. Tosfos, there's a lot of Gemaras. Some Gemaras imply that a Jewish person has mazel and cannot change it. Some imply that they can. For instance, there's a Gemara where it was Rabbi Akiva's daughter. The astrologist told him that she was going to get bitten by a snake and die, and she didn't. And the reason was because she gave tzedakah. She had the schus of giving tzedakah, so she didn't die, even though under her mazel it said that she would die. But you have others, so it sounds like you could change mazel. Then there's other gemaras that say Hashem told Rav Elazar ben Padas, right, that he has a mazel to be poor and there's nothing he could do about it. Then there's another gemara that says where Rava said that a person's, kind of like what the Ramchal said here, that a person's children, how old he's going to be and whether he's going to be wealthy or not. That's just dependent on mazel, and there's nothing you can do about it. It said Rav Chizda lived to be 92. He had 60 wedding feasts, and he had fine bread even for his dogs. For the dogs, and Rabbah was 40. He had 60 funerals, and he didn't even have enough barley. He barely had enough barley to feed people. So the way Tosfos deals with all these Gemaras is he says that a person has mazel, but through a schus gadol, a great merit, he can change it. And the example is Avram Avinu. Avraham was born under a mazel that he shouldn't have any children. But from a schus gadol, he was able to change that, and he merited to have children. So that's the way Tosfos says. And to me, it sounds like the Ramchal is saying, I think the same as Tosfos, that a person has mazel, but through a big schus, through a big merit, he could change it. Now, not everyone agrees to Tosfos. The Rambam has a famous letter where he says there's no mazel for Jews whatsoever. It doesn't exist. Like, he says we don't go like those opinions in the Gemara. But there's a run. If anyone wants sources on this, I'm more than happy to send. But the Ran says we hold Ein Mazel Yisrael. There's a Rashba. But if anyone wants to learn these sources, more than happy to send them. But the way the Ramchal is saying is that there is mazel. Certain things are decreed upon a person, but through a big schus, a merit, they can be changed. See, just someone here asked a question. So someone asked, do specific zechusim stand out to change bad mazel, or are they all equal? I can read you Tosfos' wording. He doesn't say like specific things, but he does say. I think his wording is schus gadol, like a great. Yeah, schus gadol. He says like a big merit. So it sounds like not just a little thing. Like you need something significant, to change mazel. Now it could be that every case is different and how much to change it and things like that. But the point is, what we should take out of it is that if a person's in a bad situation, he should never give up. He or she should never give up, because if he is born under a bad mazel, it could be changed with a schus gadol, and who knows, for that person, davening a little more with kavanah could be a schus gadol for him, or giving a little tzedakah. We see Rabbi Akiva's daughter's life was saved for just giving tzedakah. There's another story in the Gemara also with that. Shmuel and I forgot the other. Ablat. Ablat, he saw a man passing by, and he said, "Snake's gonna bite him, and he's gonna die." And Shmuel said, if he's a Jew, he's gonna come back. And he did, and the reason he came back was because he gave tzedakah. So he had a schus that saved his life. So something just like giving tzedakah changed his life, saved his life, even though apparently the mazel was that he should die. Okay, let's just go a little further. Now, the way the stars impact a person's life is dependent on what Hashem wants. And he says, the astrologers and certain people who know this chachma can figure out a person's future by looking at the stars. A little bit of it. But they don't know everything. These astrologers only have the power to see some of the things that will happen in the future, but not everything. And all the more so now that we're saying that they could be changed. You see all these stories in the Gemara. So he's saying that there is such a thing as astrology, that astrologers can look at the stars and tell a person certain things about his future, but not everything. And the Ramchal adds, it's not always so relevant either, because a person can change his mazel through a schus. It says that the astrologers can tell certain things that will transpire, but not everything that will transpire. Now, when he's talking about the astrologers, I assume he means like people that actually knew what they were doing. I don't assume that he means like the columns in the paper and like the horoscopes and stuff like that. But there is such a chachma of astrology to be able to tell somewhat of a person's future, because the way Hashem, the hashpah starts in the kochos, the spiritual realms, and the way they get transferred into the physical world is through the stars and through the constellations. And what's going to happen to a person is decreed in the stars. However, through a schus gadol, a great merit, they can be changed. And that's why we should never give up if we have in a tough situation, because it can always be changed. So I don't know, the zodiac sign someone's asking about. It seems like they're, yes, it does have an impact. Now, I don't know how it works. I don't know if it depends on the minute a person's born, the second, or where, and all these other things. That's what I'm saying. I don't think what it says in the newspaper, oh, you're a Gemini, like, oh, that's such a Gemini thing to do, or oh, you must be a Capricorn. Like, I don't know if that's it. Like, I don't know anything about the chachma of astrology, but just that we should know that there is such a concept, and we shouldn't worry though if we had bad mazel, right? We say mazel tov. He points out we believe in mazel, right? There's such a thing, but we can overcome it, as Jews. And that's what the Ramchal is saying. And according to the Rambam, we don't hold a mazel at all. I'm curious at the Rambam Simchas if they said mazel tov or not. I don't know what they, maybe they said. What did the Sfardim say? They probably Sephardi. Maybe they say something else, right? The Sfardim say something else? I don't know.
They say Mabruk.
Yeah, maybe that's what the Rambam said. I don't even know what that means. But all right. Any questions or comments or anything?